It's Friday, April 18th, 2025. We've got a Friday 5-pack of stories, Ask or Tell Me Anything, and more next on the AM Update. Well, congratulations one and all, human and lizard, for making it through another week here on the AM Update. What a week, as always, as it was. We have a Friday 5-pack beginning with this tragedy on the campus of Florida State University yesterday as 20-year-old Phoenix Eichner, the son of a Leon County Sheriff's deputy, opened fire, killing 2 individuals. They were not students of Florida State University yesterday afternoon. 6 individuals were hospitalized, as well as the suspect. Keep all of those individuals in your prayer. Just kind of a rattling story, especially for the law enforcement community in Leon County, Florida. You just don't expect something like this to happen. From what I have heard is that this Phoenix Eichner, his mother, was a fairly well-known sheriff's deputy in Leon County, Florida. And so, again, keep everybody involved with this story in your prayer. In Texas, on the topic of Carmelo Anthony, that 17-year-old who is accused of stabbing in cold blood a star athlete named Austin Metcalf. Well, his attorney held a press conference yesterday, and members of the Metcalf family, including Austin Metcalf's father, showed up. Here is how Carmelo Anthony's attorney responded.
And all I'm going to say, so it don't be asked later, is that was disrespectful and just shows you all the character who is not invited. He knows that it's inappropriate to be near this family, but he did it. And so I say to people, actions speak louder than words. Okay? What he has failed into is the political operatives that want to make this thing a political thing of hate, yet bigotry, and yet racism.
That is the attorney for Carmelo Anthony, the 17-year-old who brought a knife to a track meet in Frisco, Texas. The story goes he was asked to move because he was in the wrong area. He was asked to move by Austin Metcalf, so this individual, Carmelo Anthony, responded by stabbing Metcalf in the heart. You just heard his attorney address Metcalf's father, who showed up to a press conference, and called the father of the murdered boy, quote-unquote, disrespectful. I mean, what do you do with that? That's just heinous. New FDA Commissioner Marty Makary sat down for an interview with Megyn Kelly to talk about his priorities at the Food and Drug Administration.
Well, we have to do 2 things. Number one is we have to partner with industry and pharma to facilitate the process to make it user-friendly and expeditious. We shouldn't be in a receive-only mode. We want American pharma companies to do well and companies that do business in the United States to do well. But the scientific evaluation needs to be independent. And that's why today we're announcing we're removing industry members, pharma members from FDA advisory committees. I was shocked when I learned that employees of big pharma companies sit on FDA advisory committees as members of those committees. So we're going to be replacing them whenever statutorily possible with patients and family caregivers. We are going to be inviting pharma companies to send representatives to the advisory committees, but they can sit with the rest of the public and watch and pose questions as the rest of the American public can.
That is new FDA Commissioner Marty Makary telling Megyn Kelly, and it should be shocking, you just heard him say it's shocking in and of itself, that pharma members will not be serving on advisory committees any longer. That is a welcome change. Good on Dr. Marty Makary at the FDA. Story number 4 on our Friday 5-pack. I had this soundbite in the out-of-context opening montage to Thursday's AM Update. I realized driving into work the next morning, that morning that it aired, I realized I didn't actually include the story. Dope! So Letitia James, New York Attorney General, she who has tried her best to engage in lawfare against President Donald Trump while he was out of office, well, she herself is in some legal trouble, I should say. She's accused by the Department of Justice of mortgage fraud. She allegedly marked her father down as her husband to co-sign or write documents for a property in Norfolk, Virginia, a couple of properties in Norfolk, Virginia. There are some investigations underway, both of which have concluded that she's not actually the resident at either of those properties in Virginia. She's also accused of falsifying documents for a property in New York. Here she is the other day addressing her legal troubles.
Mission is clear. I'm focused. I'm prepared. I'm ready. I've been trained by the best. I went to Howard University.
Yes.
That overturned legal segregation in this country.
Yes, Howard University. Isn't that Kamala's alma mater? Kamala Gook's alma mater? Trained by the best, she says. She's ready to go. Accused by the Department of Justice of mortgage fraud. Finally, soundbite of the week. This is President Trump in the Oval Office yesterday on the topic of Jimmy Carter. Probably feeling pretty good these days, wherever he is.
Administration in the history of our country. Worse than Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter died a happy man. You know why? Because he wasn't the worst president. Joe Biden was. So I think you're going to see some fantastic numbers when this all happens.
Jimmy Carter died a happy man because he was no longer the worst president in the history of the United States, according to President Trump. Let us get going with some Ask or Tell Me Anything. Ask me any question you want. Tell me any news story you think needs covered on the AM Update. Let's begin with this from Master Jedi Patriot. In reference to the Carmelo Anthony story, Google Kaysen Allison, similar case here in Texas, a white student who brought a knife to school and stabbed a Hispanic student during a fight in a school bathroom. He's on trial right now for murder in Bell County. This is from People magazine. The murder trial of a high school student who admitted to stabbing his classmate to death kicked off in Texas this week. Kaysen Allison, now 21, confessed to killing Jose Luis Ramirez, an 18-year-old, during a fight in a boys' bathroom at Belton High School back on May 3rd of 2022, according to an arrest affidavit obtained by People magazine. Allison's lawyer, Zachary Boyd, said in his opening statement that then 18-year-old acted in self-defense after finding himself forced to fight Ramirez in a group of his friends. Allison, who has been on house arrest ever since posting a $175,000 bail back in 2022, is facing anywhere between 5 and 99 years in prison if convicted. So this is a fairly similar story. The facts of the matter are slightly different, and maybe even somewhat fundamentally different. This seems like a premeditated fight of some stripe. Seems like both sides were somewhat rankling the other. With the Carmelo Anthony story, from what we've been told, is that he was in a place that he should not have been. He was asked to leave. He then escalated the situation. He brought a knife to a track meet. And when he was asked to leave, he escalated, would not leave, and then stabbed Austin Metcalf in the heart. Of course, I think, Jedi Master Patriot, you know why one is a big story and the other is not. At least one is a big story in right-wing circles and the other is not. And I hate doing this, but the left is really forcing this issue. They're not going to let us just ignore the subtext of this story. And I hate being if the roles were reversed, but that's obviously true. If it had been a white student who was in the wrong place, brought a knife to a track meet, and stabbed a black student, not a Hispanic student, different rung on the intersectionality totem pole, we would be maybe looking at burned cities right now. That's just the reality. And that's why it's so insidious what this case is. It's not a big story nationally. It's a big story in right-wing media, but it's not a big story nationally, and that's for obvious reasons. And it's a big story right-wing because Carmelo Anthony raised close to $500,000 and is now living in a gated community in a near $1 million home. That's sending a wrong message to young men like Carmelo Anthony. It is obviously one set of standards for one group of people and another set of standards for another. Racial idolatry of the highest order on full display. That's why everybody's pissed off about this story and not the one that you sent. Let's get to a couple here about tariffs and the ongoing tariff war. Jim says, sure, the nation is not merely an economy. That's right. But we don't need to gaslight ourselves that trade deficits are a bad in and of themselves, or tariffs good in themselves? Tariff China, yes. Subsidize our chips and antibiotics, yes. But why antagonize the rest of the world and into China's hands? I think that's a fair set of questions to ask. And I think you're speaking broadly here on the right. I don't think tariffs in and of themselves are good. I don't think deficits in and of themselves are bad. What is, I think, inherently bad, though, is allowing a nation's economy, and yes, the nation, as you correctly pointed out there, a nation is not just an economy. We're not just a tax farm for the globalist elites. What is inherently bad, though, is having your economy, your market, being wide open for the rest of the world, and the rest of the world not having their markets wide open to us. Now, because we are one of the world's largest economies, and by a long shot of any country, I mean, if you want to use the European Union, they as a whole, but none of the countries measure up, but European Union as a whole, they're somewhat comparative in terms of median GDP per capita. But in terms of GDP per capita as a singular country, there is no competition with the United States. So yes, we have a big stick, and yes, there are going to be trade deficits when we're talking about trading with smaller countries. That's just going to be inherent. What's not free trade, though, is when it's free trade for thee with me, but not free trade for me with thee. I think that's what President Trump is trying to undo here. Now, that's separate from the case that Council of Economic Advisors Chair Stephen Miran made about tariffs. He seems to believe in the plan that he put out there is different from what we're seeing play out right now in some fundamental ways. The plan that he put out there is that because of the incidence of tariffs and how over-leveraged China's manufacturing sector and employment and training and their workers are geared towards American markets, he says that tariffs, actually the incidence of tariffs, who feels the pain of tariffs, is actually the Chinese and not the American consumer. That is separate from how I think President Trump is using tariffs right now, which is basically a cudgel leverage for better deals. So why antagonize the rest of the world and into China's hands? Well, I can flip this around on you as well. If you tried to go the multilateral route, where you're not antagonizing the world and the markets and rankling the markets and creating instability, if you try to go the multilateral route, well, countries can just kick the can down the road. That's what we've been doing over and over and over again. So yeah, you're going to piss a lot of people off here. And I'm not saying one way is necessarily better than the other. I'm just saying you got to choose a way. You're either going to knock over the tables right now, or run the risk, if you go the multilateral route, of trying to curry favor with all of these different countries into some sort of an accord against China. That just runs the risk of being able to be kicked and kicked and kicked and kicked down the road. So either way, you're running risks. But what I do know is the current path we were on was unsustainable. Something had to change. So yes, you can poke holes in all of the different ways that President Trump is trying to achieve his stated outcomes, which is, I think, isolating China, bringing manufacturing back home, shoring up critical supply chains. But you're going to have to do something. We were going to have to do something one way or another if we were going to do anything at all. Maybe it's just the goal or the desire of the people of this country to just be a part of China's centralized economy. Maybe that's just all we want, and we're going to find the answer to that question sooner rather than later. When we come back, more about tariffs and the impacts on gold and the U.S. dollar. That's coming up next. On Ask or Tell Me Anything, Joel GJ is up next. He attached the recent episode of, I think it's Breaking Points, with Sagar Enjeti and Crystal Ball, where they discuss the ongoing consternation over the value of the dollar, Treasury, U.S. Treasury markets, bond markets, and sundry issues, instabilities as it pertains to the American stock market. I did listen to that episode on double time. Since it was only 20 minutes, I could get through it in 10 minutes. My takeaway is that their concerns about what this is doing to the U.S. dollar, which is kind of a surprise, I think, to some, meaning the U.S. dollar is actually weakening right now, not strengthening. And the obvious analog in recent times to a major country's currency weakening very rapidly is Liz Truss's ouster as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. I think she lasted 45, 47 days, shortest tenure of any Prime Minister in that country's history, because the value of the pound just tanked after she released a pretty bold budget that included tax cuts. It was aimed at spurring the UK economy. That spooked the markets. People dumped the pound, and that's kind of an analog of what's going on right now. Now, it's a little bit different story because we are still the world's reserve currency. The British pound is not. But their concern is that this could essentially create so much instability, being that we are the world's reserve currency, that the dollar's value dips, that has untold ripple effects. So, I caught a few things that kind of made me roll my eye in this episode. If you want to find this episode, Joel has posted it in the pinned tweet for Ask or Tell Me Anything. You can have your own opinions, but I do think some of their concerns are warranted. And I don't fault anybody for being concerned, about the future here. I don't at all. These are definitely insecure, unstable times, uncertain times for sure. But again, regardless of the route, going back to the last answer, regardless of the route that President Trump decided on this journey of trying to reshape the world's economic system or trade system, while the United States still has some sort of leverage, there were going to be risks or trade-offs either way. Okay, the one trade-off of going the more peaceful route when it comes to not rankling the markets is never actually getting anything positive done long-term. The risk of doing it the way he's done, unilaterally, and really just creating the sense of urgency to get everybody to the negotiating table as soon as possible, that risks kind of some of the instability that you're seeing right now. Let's go to this. Ari says, did you cover that homeschool family from Massachusetts who got arrested for fleeing the state when they refused to vaccinate your kids? I have seen that story. Something about it made my millennial BS-o-meter spidey senses start to tingle. I'm sympathetic to those who believe the narrative that you've seen on social media as opposed to legacy media. Because everything that you've seen in legacy media, it seems to be what you would say if you're really trying to obfuscate the real reason why these parents were arrested and had, as the story goes, their children taken away from them. However, outside of various medical freedom influencers, I've seen this posited in multiple places. I have not seen any evidence from the parents themselves or from media reports on this story that not vaccinating their kids was the primary reason why they had to go on the lam. Again, I don't know for sure. I don't know. I'm just letting the story play out. But I'll just tell you. I'll tell you, something makes my spidey senses tingle. And I'll just go back to the AM Update Expert versus AI special. What was the moral of that story? Anything that immediately grabs your emotion right off the bat, you should automatically, in this day and age, be skeptical of. I'm not saying that the story that's presented, the way it's being presented by certain online influencers, is not what's actually going on. But I think we need to tread really, really lightly here. Because if you are wrong, you will be seen as coming to the defense of parents who allegedly have been actually neglecting their kids. Now, whether that neglect means I'm not vaccinating my baby, or whether it's actual real life neglect by the old definition of it. So that's my take on this story. I could be wrong. I've done some research on this, and I can't really find any definitive link between the parents, like words they have said on camera, and how their story is being presented by certain medical freedom influencers online. Tread very lightly. I'm not trying to be... Lord knows I'm not trying to be a stuck-up person here. Not trying to say, hey, look at my discernment. Not trying to do that at all. It's just coming from me. If you trust me, my spidey senses are tingling. That's all. Patrick Hawkins says, just out of curiosity, would it even be possible for you to run for governor and keep your show going? I'm assuming you're talking about this one. And yes, it would be. Practically, no. Job of the governor is very demanding. But legally, yeah, I think you could keep it going, if that's your question. Let's do one more. Actually, a couple more. Follow Truth says, it's very clear the Democrats' politicians is trying to prop up this El Salvador illegal criminal as the next George Floyd to push their immigration agenda as being something we need, and they are trying to create the same empathy, but will the Democrat voter take the bait? My hope is no, and we're already seeing signs of this backfiring for Democrat politicians. Nowhere anywhere has an El Salvador flag in their bio, although that could change any day. But the Trump White House has been loud and clear with truthful messaging on this. Yeah, you saw what the White House did this week. They just completely laid a trap for Democrats to fall into, and it was masterful. Yeah, sure, you want to go to El Salvador to stand in solidarity with this illegal alien? Well, we're going to drop some truth bombs on you. Yes, we do have it confirmed via court records this guy was in a gang. Yes, we do have it confirmed via court records that this dude had a notice of restraining placed upon him for being a woman beater. And, oh, by the way, the Tennessee Highway Patrol was told by the Biden FBI to release this guy from their custody for being suspected of human trafficking. The White House laid an immaculate trap this week, and the Democrats fell right into it. I mean, I even saw James Carville, who was very critical of Democrats, his own party, during the last election. He said this week, the Democrats need to make this their number one story. If even he is saying that, there might not be any hope for this party in terms of pragmatism. They can always still win, as long as their opposition is not successful. But yeah, this week was a masterful trap, because they were definitely trying to make him into the next George Floyd, and that's not working out super well. One more question. Let's go to this one. Bruce says, you mentioned last year's Christmas break and rest was a game changer, and from my perspective, it seemed to be the impetus for moving the show to another level. Do you plan to do the same this year, and will you incorporate other breaks or rests into your schedule? This is something that I've thought a lot about this year, and I assume you're talking about this show, the AM Update, since you didn't specify my day job. And I do think it was an impetus for hopefully taking this to another level. Making some of the production changes and some of the format changes kind of gave me a little bit more energy as well. This is not a hard job. What is hard about it is the discipline, because not everybody has the discipline to be able to turn on the microphone and try to the best of their abilities, speak clearly and rationally about 10 to 15 stories every single day. Every single day. The every single day part is the hard part, even though, sitting in front of a microphone isn't in and of itself hard. So to answer your question, this is something I've thought a lot about. And I think, I have to give myself breaks, because this is my side project. It's not my main job. And so I need breaks from both. And so I have been in conversation with somebody who might be able to fill in for me every now and then. I also plan to do more if I need a day off, whether that's from sickness or just a vacation day. There will be some best of editions. And I also plan on doing some more special editions like what you heard. So I told you that Expert versus AI, that's going to be the first of a 4-part series. The next part I hope to air in early July or late June. I've been working on a special edition for Independence Day. So yeah, it's not going to sound the same, but the reason why I'm not just going to go dead air in terms of getting some time off is because during the Christmas break, which I really needed, lost some listenership then. So it's really important to have content every single day. So thank you for asking that question. Ben, do you want to come say hi?
Hi.
Good job. What have you been up to today? What?
Daddy stayed home today.
Well, Daddy didn't stay home today. Daddy got home, but we went to where did we go?
The Windflower.
Yeah, we went to the park.
And after we go to the park, we got to walk by the water.
We did get to walk by the drainage ditch. Yeah. Did you have fun?
I have fun.
Good.
They walked to Windflower like me.
Yeah. It was a good time. Can you tell the good listeners goodbye?
Goodbye.
And say, I'll see you tomorrow on No Suck Saturday.
I see you tomorrow on
Good job, buddy. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Like you said, we'll be back tomorrow for No Suck Saturday. That would be Bella and I. For everybody else, if you don't catch that, back at it again on Monday.